Good morning, people of Exmouth. We're here from a number of churches representing Christians in Exmouth, and we just come out on a Friday to share something of our faith and the joy of our faith, because Jesus has done something marvelous in our lives, and we recognize that. We accept that, we acknowledge that, and we give thanks for that. Because none of us are worthy of his goodness nor his mercy, and yet, graciously, he has forgiven us. He has made us new people, given us a new focus in life, and enabled us to rejoice with hope in this life. I want to share a few words with you this morning. There's a story about a man who wanted to build a house very quickly, and he'd been given a plot of land, but he'd not surveyed the land very carefully. And he dug the usual kind of foundations that was needed for the house that he wanted to build. And he began to build, but it was on sand. And he didn't think much about that, but each day went by and he made progress in building the house until eventually it was complete. But then, of course, the storms came, and those storms were quite violent in the winter, and he found that most of the rain that had not drained away properly was seeping away at his foundations, until eventually the foundations began to crack and the house began to move, until eventually it came down. He'd wasted money, he'd made decisions that were wrong. He thought that he was being wise, but clearly he was unwise. Most of us want to be wise people today. We want to think that we are wise and that we will not be misled, and that we will make the right decisions in our lives that will prove helpful. But you know, so many of us in life fail to make wise decisions. I was hearing only a little while ago, as you probably have as well, it's been flashed about on the media so often about elderly people being scammed out of their money and taken for a ride by fraudsters who've leaked away into their accounts and deprived them of their benefit and their futures. We all think that we're wise, but oftentimes we're unwise in the decisions that we make, like the man who built his house on the sand. There's another story that parallels that, where Jesus says a man built another house, a different man. This time he made sure that the foundations were sure. This time he built on rock, solid rock, so that when the storms came about, the house didn't move, the house was not shaken, it wasn't undermined by the flooding, it stood firm. And in that parable, Jesus was describing that everyone who looks to him and believes upon him and puts their trust in him, they will be like that man who built his house, that wise man that built his house on the rock. And I think it's so important that we take into account those important words of Jesus, that we too are wise, that we too listen to him, take on board what he says, what he has shared for our benefit and our blessing. Before Jesus was born, there were wise men in the East who were looking for the person who would bring them life. And they studied the stars, and through the stars and their mathematics, they worked out that on a certain day, on a certain time, when the stars were in alignment, that would be the occasion when that person would be born that they wanted to put their trust in. And we know the story, of course, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Sometime afterwards, wise men came from the east. Those very wise men who studied the stars, and they came and worshipped him because they acknowledged in that babe was the Savior of the world. They were called wise men, I suppose, because they followed Jesus thereafter. And to be truly wise, that's what we need to do. We likewise need to follow Jesus. Follow his words, believe in them, in the promises that he brings from God to us. And as we believe on them, we will find that they are true, because Jesus is as good as his word. He didn't come to scam anybody. He didn't come to in any way undermine their lives, but to give them life. And that's what we recognize here this morning, that Jesus is the life, and all who put their trust in him can be called wise men and women. Bless you.
Well done, Rob.